This image seemed to portray a bond of friendship, yet the girl's neckline hinted at a deeper, unspoken reality. A steady rain tapped a rhythmic pattern against the windows of the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C. Dr. Elena Rodriguez was settled in her third-floor office, meticulously documenting newly acquired items for the collection. With 15 years of experience as a curator focused on African American history following the Civil War, she had honed a feeling for identifying important objects. Today, an item waiting in the next donation container would confirm that feeling was right. She picked up a cardboard shipping box sent from Savannah, Georgia. Within, protected by sheets of acid-free tissue paper, was a solitary picture fixed to a sturdy cardboard backing. The instant Elena raised it into the light, she understood this piece was different. The picture displayed two teenage girls, likely between 14 and 16 years of age, positioned together inside a formal photographer's studio. A painted canvas behind them illustrated a garden setting complete with rose bushes in full bloom. Each girl wore a refined dress featuring high necklines, tightly fitted waists, and lengthy sleeves, garments indicative of affluent households in the 1880s. The girl on the left was white, her light hair arranged in a contemporary style. Her stance exuded a natural assurance, one arm resting easily at her hip. The girl on the right was black, her hair neatly coiffed, her hands clasped together in a formal, upright posture. They stood near one another, their closeness implying a connection of some kind. Elena's trained historical awareness immediately noted the irregularity. Posed studio portraits from 1882, Georgia, depicting black and white children together as seeming social peers, were immensely uncommon. The American South in 1888 existed in a time 3 years prior to the Plessy versus Ferguson ruling. Yet racial separation was already firmly established through social practice, legislation, and brutal force. She flipped the photograph over. In faint, brownish ink was a simple inscription, Margaret and Lily. June 1888. Savannah. No family names, no further details, merely 2 given names and a date. Elena retrieved her professional magnifying loupe and inspected the picture more carefully. The image's technical execution was superb. Crisp clarity, perfect lighting, and thoughtful arrangement showed this was the work of an accomplished professional photographer, not a novice. A considerable sum had been paid for this portrait, but as Elena scrutinized the girl's expressions, a sense of disquiet grew within her. The white girl, Margaret, gazed straight into the lens with a relaxed, genuine look. Her physical attitude communicated ease and a sense of ownership over the space. However, the black girl's disposition was distinctly different. Lily's gaze was angled somewhat downward, not fully, engaging with the camera. Her shoulders were slightly rounded, and her hands, pressed together at her midsection, were held in a manner that suggested deference rather than comfort. Elena had inspected innumerable historical photos. She understood how to interpret the nuanced signals of posture, expression, and physical arrangement. This image was communicating 2 separate narratives, the superficial tale of 2 youthful friends and a more somber reality lying beneath. She picked up the donation letter that had come with the box. Dear Dr. Rodriguez, I discovered this photograph while sorting through my late grandmother's attic in Savannah. I feel it may possess historical importance, though I do not know its full story. This picture has always unsettled me for reasons I cannot fully explain. Perhaps your knowledge can uncover what I feel but cannot clearly see. I trust you will approach whatever truth it holds with the necessary respect. Sincerely, Patricia Whitmore. Elena read the note a second time, observing the cautious wording, whatever truth it contains. Patricia Whitmore had sensed something about this picture, even if she couldn't define it precisely. Elena lifted her telephone and called her colleague, Dr. Marcus Chen, an expert in 19th century photographic methods and artifact examination. Marcus, I require your knowledge on something. Can you come to my office? I believe we may have uncovered something important. I'll be there in 5 minutes, Marcus answered. Elena turned her attention back to the photograph, studying the 2 youthful faces separated from her by over 100 years, Margaret and Lily. What had the genuine nature of their connection been? And why had this single picture endured for 136 years, intentionally safeguarded across generations? She felt an increasing conviction that this photograph concealed truths that urgently needed to be revealed. Marcus Chen arrived with the promptness of a man who had collaborated with Elena on numerous historical inquiries. He brought his computer, a handheld digital microscope, and a screen calibrated for accurate color equipment that enabled them to study historical images at magnifications impossible when the pictures were first taken. "What do we have?" he inquired, arranging his devices on Elena's desk. Elena passed him the photograph and the donation letter. 1888, Savannah, Georgia. Two girls posed together in what looks like a portrait of friendship. "Tell me your initial observations." Marcus examined the picture for a long moment, his face moving from interest to concentrated alertness. He possessed the educated eye of someone who had dedicated 2 decades to studying historical photographs for clues about social structures, power relations, and concealed stories. "Nearly every aspect of this is irregular," he stated finally. "An integrated portrait from the post-Reconstruction South showing black and white children posed as social equals? That isn't merely uncommon, it's practically unprecedented." By 1888, the fleeting hope of Reconstruction had been entirely dismantled. The South was re-establishing its racial caste system through Jim Crow legislation, segregation, and organized intimidation. Wealthy white families did not pay for costly portraits, showing their children in close, intimate poses with black children unless they intended to communicate a very particular message. "What sort of message?" Elena asked, though she was already developing her own theory. "Control masked as generosity," Marcus stated. During the 1,880 seconds and 1,890 seconds, there was a broad campaign among white Southerners to sentimentalize the pre-Civil War era, what scholars now label the lost cause mythology. A component of that mythology involved representing slavery as a kindly system where enslaved individuals were content, devoted, and considered extended family. Affluent white families occasionally commissioned photographs showing their children with black children as a method of displaying their alleged compassion and the so-called natural racial hierarchy. He connected his digital microscope to his laptop and carefully positioned the photograph beneath its lens. "If my theory is correct, there will be visual proof within this image that tells a story completely different from the one it was intended to convey. Let's take a closer look." The picture materialized on the monitor, and Marcus started systematically inspecting different areas. He began with the general arrangement, then moved to specific elements, the expressions on their faces, their physical stances, their attire, their hands. "Observe the spatial relationship," Marcus commented, using his cursor to indicate invisible lines across the screen. Margaret is placed a little more forward, dominating the frame. Her body is turned with confidence, her posture straight. She is looking directly at the lens. This is typical, self-assured positioning for an individual who feels they have a right to be photographed. He redirected his attention to Lily. "Now, observe the contrasts. Lily is placed a bit farther back and angled to the side. Her posture is closed, her shoulders hunched in a defensive stance. Her head is tilted down in a manner that suggests deference, and most tellingly, her eyes. She isn't focusing on the camera. Her gaze is fixed on a spot just beneath and to the left of the lens. She is avoiding a direct look, which could be interpreted as timidity," Elena noted. "But when considered alongside her other physical cues, it reads as instructed submission," Marcus concluded. "This is the posture of a person who has been trained not to look white individuals in the eye. That was a standard requirement for black individuals in the South at that time. Making direct eye contact with white people, particularly white women and children, was often seen as disrespect and could be met with severe physical retaliation." Marcus enlarged the image on the girl's hands, and Elena moved nearer to the monitor. The disparity was shocking and impossible to ignore. Margaret's hands were light, soft, and unblemished, the hands of a person who had never done hard work. But Lily's hands communicated a completely separate history. Even in the aged, sepia-toned picture, the proof was unmistakable. Lily's hands displayed obvious calluses, coarse skin, and what looked like several faint scars across her knuckles and palms. Her fingertips seemed somewhat worn and showed slight discoloration. "Those are the hands of a laborer," Marcus stated softly. "Hands accustomed to difficult, repetitive tasks over a long period. Look here at the fingertips. Notice these tiny dark marks? Those are the results of numerous needle pricks. She was likely performing detailed sewing work, probably for many hours each day." Elena experienced the well-known mix of sorrow and resolve that surfaced whenever she uncovered painful historical realities. "So this picture isn't a record of friendship. It's a record of subjugation." Marcus fine-tuned the digital microscope, shifting the view gradually upward from the girls' hands to their torsos. Both gowns seemed well-made, constructed from good materials with precise stitching. But as the magnified picture on the display reached the area of Lily's neck, Marcus's hand abruptly stilled. "Elena," he said, his tone strained with contained feeling, "you need to examine this closely." The neckline of Lily's dress was high and snug, in keeping with the style of the 1880 seconds, intended to conceal most of the neck, but under extreme magnification, using the digital enhancement software Marcus was operating, something was revealed that would have been undetectable to the unaided eye in 1888, or even today, without specialized technology. The collar wasn't lying perfectly against Lily's skin. A minute space, just a hair's breadth, showed where the fabric had moved slightly, and within that slim opening, made visible by digital zoom and contrast adjustment, were markings on Lily's neck, thin, horizontal lines, scars, several scars running parallel around her throat. Elena felt a physical jolt of understanding. She had encountered descriptions of such marks before in her studies, within slave narrative accounts and Civil War-era medical records, but she had never seen them photographed with such definition. "Collar scars," Marcus said, his scholarly detachment barely containing his feeling, "resulting from the extended wear of a metal collar or the repeated application of rope bindings around the neck. These scars are not new. You can observe how they have mended and lightened over time. They would have been inflicted years before this picture was taken, likely when Lily was much smaller." Elena performed a quick mental calculation. "The picture is from 1888. Lily looks to be about 14 or 15, meaning she was born around 1873 or 1874, 8 or 9 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. She was born legally free. So, how does she bear the scars of a collar?" Marcus's face was solemn, because the legal abolition of slavery did not equate to its actual end. In isolated parts of the South, some enslaved individuals were not told of their freedom for months or even years after the proclamation. Some landowners simply refused to acknowledge it. And even after slavery was formally outlawed, it was frequently superseded by other systems of coerced labor, convict leasing, debt peonage, and so-called voluntary apprenticeships. Black children, particularly orphans or those from destitute families, were regularly forced into labor contracts that were slavery in all but name. He increased the contrast further, and more details materialized. At least 4 separate scar lines were now discernible, each one indicating repeated injury to the same area. The skin had healed, but the tissue had formed raised ridges, evidence that these were not minor wounds, but deep, recurring abrasions. The collar would have been worn for long durations, Marcus continued, his tone becoming analytical. Perhaps as a punitive measure, perhaps as a permanent form of control. The scarring indicates it was fastened tightly enough to limit motion. It caused persistent skin irritation and was likely constructed from iron or coarse rope. This represents the sustained, intentional physical confinement of a child. Elena stood, needing to pace to absorb what they were seeing. We must inspect every element of this picture. If collar scars are visible, there could be other proof we have missed. Marcus gave a grim nod and started methodically scanning other sections of the image at the highest magnification. He moved to Lily's wrists, where her long sleeves ended just above her hands. "Here," he said, modifying the contrast again. "Look at her wrists. Even partly hidden by the cuff of her sleeve, further scarring was apparent. Thin lines encircling both wrists, the same configuration as the neck scars, though less pronounced. Restraints on her wrists," Elena said. She was bound by her hands as well. Frequently, based on the scarring, Marcus confirmed. This wasn't a one-time event. This was methodical, repeated over a long stretch of time during her childhood. They proceeded with their inspection quietly, recording each discovery with captured images and meticulous documentation. This photograph, which had initially seemed an odd but potentially harmless portrait, was exposing itself as something much more dark, a captured testimony of child maltreatment and unlawful servitude, deliberately arranged to appear as a scene of benevolent, interracial friendship. "We must discover the identities of these girls," Elena stated firmly. "Their full names, their families, what became of them after this picture was taken. Lily's story must be shared. The truth within this image must be recorded and safeguarded." Elena returned to her workstation and lifted the telephone receiver, dialing the number Patricia Whitmore had provided with her donation. The line rang several times before a woman's voice answered. It was the voice of an older person, yet distinct and firm. "Hello, Miss Whitmore. This is Dr. Elena Rodriguez from the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture. I'm calling regarding the photograph you sent to us." "Oh," Patricia's voice held a clear note of relief. "Yes, I've been hoping to hear from you. I haven't been able to stop thinking about that picture since I mailed it. Did you learn something?" Elena measured her words with care. "We have learned something, Miss Whitmore, something of great importance. Before I share our findings, could you please tell me more about how you acquired this image and anything you might know concerning the individuals pictured?" Patricia took an audible breath, and Elena could hear the sound of shuffling papers. "I discovered it last year while sorting through my grandmother Eleanor's home after she passed. She was 97. The picture was inside an antique trunk in the attic, stored with some old correspondence and other documents. My grandmother never spoke of it to me while she was living, and I had never laid eyes on it before that moment." "What was your grandmother's full maiden name?" Elena asked. "Eleanor Whitmore. She was born Eleanor Pitan in 1923, but she married into the Whitmore line. The Whitmores have lived in Savannah since before the Civil War." "They were." Patricia paused, and Elena could hear the struggle in her tone. "They were a family of means, plantation owners. I won't make excuses for that." "Thank you for your candor," Elena said. "That sort of directness is essential for historical work of this nature. Do you believe one of the girls in the photograph is your relative?" "Yes. I suspect the white girl, Margaret, could be my great-great-grandmother. Our family records list several Margarets from that generation, and the age seems correct. That was one reason I sent the photograph to you. I was hoping you could help confirm her identity and, perhaps, uncover information about the other girl as well, the black girl." "Lily." "Yes, Lily," Elena said. Patricia's voice softened. "Dr. Rodriguez, when I first found that picture, I thought it was a sweet image. Two young friends from a bygone time. But the longer I studied it, the more I felt that something was profoundly off. I couldn't put my finger on it, but it disturbed me. That is why I sent it to your museum instead of keeping it or giving it to a local archive. I felt it required examination by specialists who would understand its complete context." Elena felt a wave of gratitude for Patricia's insight. "Your instinct was right, Miss Whitmore. This photograph does tell a disturbing story, though not the one it was meant to tell. Our analysis has uncovered details that were invisible to the naked eye when the picture was taken. Details that provide evidence of something very grave." "What did you find?" Patricia asked, her voice steady despite the clear tension. "Evidence that Lily was not Margaret's friend or companion, but rather a servant, likely held in a state of forced labor that constituted a form of slavery, even though this image was created 23 years after the Emancipation Proclamation." A lengthy silence filled the line. When Patricia spoke again, her words were heavy with feeling. "I feared it was something like that, though I prayed I was mistaken. What sort of evidence?" "Scarring," Elena stated gently, "visible under high magnification around Lily's neck and wrists. The patterns are consistent with the long-term wearing of metal collars and rope restraints, the type of injury inflicted upon an enslaved or forcibly bound individual." Patricia let out a small, sharp breath. "Dear God, and my family. We don't yet know the full story," Elena interjected quickly. "That is precisely why I'm calling. You mentioned there were letters in the trunk with the photograph. Would you be willing to share those with us? They could provide the vital context we need to understand what truly happened to these girls. Of course, Patricia said without hesitation. I saved everything from that trunk. Some of the letters are faint and hard to decipher, but I will scan everyone and send them to you today. Dr. Rodriguez, I want you to know that whatever the truth is about my family's role in this, I want it recorded. My grandmother used to say you cannot heal a wound you refuse to acknowledge. If my ancestors harmed that child, that truth must be brought into the light. Elena felt a surge of admiration for the woman's fortitude. Thank you, Miss Whitmore. That willingness to confront difficult history is both rare and invaluable. I will send you my email address, and we will begin analyzing the letters the moment they arrive. By late that afternoon, Patricia's email had arrived containing 7 scanned documents. Elena and Marcus printed each one and laid them out across the large table in Elena's office, organizing them in chronological order based on the dates scribbled at the top of each page. The earliest letter was dated the 12th of March, 1888, 3 months prior to the photograph being taken. Dearest Cousin Anne, I write with news from Savannah. Father has consented to commission a formal portrait of Margaret with the girl, Lily. He is of the belief that the picture will stand as a valuable record of our family's Christian benevolence and the natural fondness that exists between the races when a correct social order is preserved. Margaret is very enthusiastic about the idea, as she has been requesting to have her likeness made for some time. Lily, as expected, displays little feeling on the matter, which is simply her way. The photographer, a Mr. Harrison, will be visiting the house in June. I shall write again after the sitting has been completed. Your devoted cousin, Catherine Whitmore. Elena read the letter a second time, her jaw clenching. Christian benevolence, natural social order. They are consciously creating a record of their own propaganda. Marcus was already scrutinizing the second letter, dated the 3rd of April, 1888. Dearest Dan, in response to your question regarding the girl, Lily, she came into our household 4 years past, when she was approximately 10 years of age. Her mother had been in our family's service since before the war, but succumbed to fever in 1883. The child had no remaining kin, and pursuant to the apprenticeship statutes, Father was able to arrange for her binding to our household until she reaches the age of 18. She has been of considerable use within the home, especially with sewing tasks and in her duties. Attending to Margaret, Margaret has grown quite attached to her, a development Father views as proof of the advantages of a well-ordered racial dynamic. The portrait will serve to illustrate the quality of care Lily receives under our guardianship. Your cousin, Catherine. Apprenticeship laws, Elena said, her voice tight with rising anger. That was one of the primary legal mechanisms used to perpetuate the enslavement of black children after emancipation. Orphaned children, or those from impoverished families, were bound to white households under the guise of learning a skill, but in practice it was uncompensated, forced labor with no liberty to depart. Marcus had moved to the third letter, dated the 20th of May, 1888. His face had lost its color. Elena, he said, his voice low. You need to see this one. The handwriting was different from Catherine's refined script, uneven and hurried. To whoever may find this, my name is Lily. I am setting this down in secret. I do not know if anyone will ever see these words, but I must attempt to leave some proof of the truth. I am not an apprentice. I am a slave in everything but the name, Missus. Whitmore strikes me when my work is not fast enough. Mr. Whitmore fastened the iron collar on me when I was younger, after I attempted to run away. They removed it 2 years ago because the scars became too noticeable, but they told me they would replace it if I ever disobeyed again. Margaret is not unkind to me at times, but she does not see that I am not her friend. I am her property. They are forcing me to sit for a picture to show the world how well they provide for me. I do not know what my future holds, but I am not happy here. I am not treated well. If a person reads this, please know that I wished for freedom. Lily, May 1888. The room became utterly still. Elena felt the sharp sting of tears in her eyes. This was no longer merely a historical artifact. It was a plea for help from a child, concealed for over a century, finally finding its way to someone who could listen. She hid her own testimony, Marcus said quietly. She knew the photograph would tell a lie about her existence, so she wrote down the reality and hid it, hoping that one day someone would discover it and know what she truly endured. Elena carefully photographed the letter with her high-resolution camera, preserving every syllable. "This alters everything," she whispered. "This isn't just the physical proof of abuse. This is Lily's own voice, bearing witness to what was done to her. We have her own account." She turned to the remaining documents, her hands trembling slightly. There were 4 more pages to review. The 4th letter was from Catherine again, dated the 15th of June, 1888, 9 days after the photograph was taken. "Dearest Anne," the portrait session proceeded wonderfully. "Mr. Harrison was most proficient, and he comprehended perfectly the impression we desired to create. Margaret and Lily stood together very naturally. And the final picture shows exactly what Father hoped it would, the accord that is possible when Christian households offer correct instruction to the Negro race. Lily was dressed in one of Margaret's former gowns, which we had tailored to her size. She looked quite respectable. The portrait will be prepared for collection within the week. Your cousin, Catherine Elena, felt a wave of revulsion. Margaret's former gowns, altered to fit. They clothed her in cast-off garments and labeled it charity. Marcus had picked up the 5th letter, his expression grim as he read. "This one is dated July 1888, he said, "and it's in the same unsteady script as Lily's hidden message. I am writing again, because I do not know how much longer I have. They have commanded me never to speak of the portrait or what it represents. Mrs. Whitmore told me that if I ever tell a soul the truth of my treatment, they will have me sent to the workhouse, where the conditions are a fate worse than dying. Margaret does not know I wrote the 1st letter. She believes I am pleased to have my picture taken with her. She does not see that I can never refuse any demand this family makes of me. Yesterday, she showed me the finished portrait and said we looked like sisters. I wanted to cry out, 'We are not sisters.' A sister knows freedom. I am writing this and concealing it in the same place as my 1st letter, behind the loose floorboard in the attic where they make me sleep. If anyone ever discovers these words, please tell my story. Please say that I lived and that I did not consent to this life." Lily Elena stood and walked to the window, struggling to master the emotions surging within her. As a historian, she had read innumerable records detailing the brutalities of slavery and its aftermath. But there was something uniquely devastating about encountering the direct, unfiltered voice of a child trapped inside that system, desperately, striving to leave behind a record of her own personhood. "2 more letters," Marcus said gently. "Do you need to pause?" "No," Elena said, turning back to the table. "No, we owe it to Lily to read every last word. She wanted someone to know. We are finally the ones who can know." The 6th letter was from Catherine, dated August 1888. "Dearest Anne, I write with disagreeable news. The girl, Lily, has grown progressively more troublesome in recent weeks. She has been sluggish in her duties and has occasionally displayed an insolent attitude. Yesterday, Margaret discovered her attempting to write something, though she insisted it was merely an exercise in penmanship. Father has determined she requires discipline. She is to be sent to labor in the fields at Father's property outside the city for 1 month, to remind her of her position and her responsibilities. Margaret is upset by this, as she has become used to Lily's company, but Father says it is a necessary measure for her correction. The portrait, at least, remains a lovely monument to our family's goodwill. We have commissioned several copies." "Your cousin, Catherine, they discovered she was writing the letters," Marcus said. "Or at least, they suspected she was writing something, so they punished her by sending her to perform field labor." Elena felt a cold fury solidify in her chest. Field labor in Georgia, in the sweltering heat of August, for a 14-year-old girl whose hands already bore the marks of years of domestic toil. The 7th and final letter was in Lily's handwriting, but the script was now barely legible. The script was weak and irregular, clearly written by a person under immense strain. "This will be my final writing. They made me work in the fields for a full month. I have returned to the house, but I am unwell. My hands are blistered from the sun and torn from the cotton plants. I have lost the proper feeling in my fingers. Mrs. Whitmore has warned me that if I am ever caught writing again, I will be sold away to a master who is far more cruel. I do not believe I could endure being sold. I am concealing this last message with the others. To the person who reads this, I was 14 years old. My mother was named Sarah. She passed when I was 10. I was given no choice about living with this family. Every statement they make about me, everything that picture shows, is a falsehood. I longed for freedom. I wanted to learn to read more than just a few simple words. I wished for a life that was my own. If I do not live through this, please remember that I wished for these things. Please remember that I attempted to speak the truth. Lily, September 1888. The writing stopped there, the last few letters fading, as if Lily had been forced to stop or had simply run out of strength. Elena and Marcus sat without speaking for a long time, the profound gravity of Lily's final words filling the space around them. "We have to learn. Her fate," Elena stated, her voice firm. "We have her testimony. We have the visual proof of her mistreatment. We have the Whitmore family's own correspondence confirming how they exploited her. But we don't know if she survived, if she ever got away, if she lived long enough to know true freedom." Marcus was already powering up his laptop. Savannah maintains detailed historical archives, census information, mortality records, church documents. If Lily lived beyond 1888, there should be some indication of her existence. For the next 72 hours, Elena and Marcus worked with single-minded determination, scouring every accessible historical database, archive, and record collection pertaining to Savannah from 1888 to 1910. They reached out to regional historians, genealogical specialists, and curators at the Georgia Historical Society. They pored over census data, death registries, marriage documents, church ledgers, and land deeds. The Whitmore family lineage was simple to follow. Affluent white families maintained thorough records and were regularly featured in town, newspapers, and social directories. Margaret Whitmore was listed in the 1890 census as a 16-year-old residing with her parents. A short society column in 1892 declared her engagement to Thomas Calloway, a merchant from Charleston. She was wed in 1893 and relocated to Charleston, where she remained until her passing in 1956 at 84. She raised 4 children and had 14 grandchildren. Her life was well chronicled, comfortable, and ordinary, but locating any sign of Lily was immensely more challenging. Black domestic workers in the post-Reconstruction South were seldom documented in official records as distinct persons, Marcus clarified, his exasperation showing. They weren't listed by name in census rolls. They were merely tallied as servants within white households. They owned no property to be recorded, and if they died, their deaths were frequently unregistered unless a legal circumstance required documentation. Elena would not concede. She contacted a genealogist, Dr. Teresa Washington, who specialized in reconstructing African-American family histories from the post-Civil War era, a scholar who had dedicated 4 decades to developing methods for locating people the official history had attempted to obliterate. Dr. Washington studied the letters, the photograph, and all the evidence Elena had gathered. Then she began her work with the meticulous perseverance of someone skilled at interpreting the gaps in incomplete archives. It required a fortnight, but she eventually called Elena with her findings. "I located her," Dr. Washington said, her tone a blend of accomplishment and sorrow. "Or more precisely, I discovered what became of her. The path was difficult, and the evidence is partial, but I am certain I have pieced together at least a portion of Lily's story after her final letter in September 1888. Elena put the call on speakerphone so Marcus could listen. "Please, tell us everything you discovered." First, the census documents. In the 1890 census, there is no Lily recorded in the Whitmore home, though that is not unexpected. They may have concealed her presence, or she may have been assigned to labor elsewhere by that time. However, I did locate a death certificate from October 1888. It is for a 14-year-old black girl, identified only as Lily, in the ward of G. Whitmore. She died at Candler Hospital in Savannah. The listed cause of death is fever. Elena felt a cold dread settle in her. She died just 2 months after writing that last letter. She was only 14. That is the formal record. Dr. Washington continued, her voice cautious. But I also uncovered something else. A very short notice in a black-owned newspaper from that period called the Savannah Tribune, dated November 1888. It is only 3 sentences, long, but it tells another story. I will read it verbatim. The girl, Lily, held by the Whitmore family under false apprenticeship, died last month. Those who knew her say she was beaten shortly before her death. The authorities have not investigated. Justice has not been served. The room was silent, the low hum of the climate control and the muffled city sounds from outside the only noise. They killed her, Elena whispered, the words heavy with grief and anger. They beat her, and she died from the injuries, and the official record calls it fever to prevent any inquiry. And she was laid in a grave without a marker, with no family to remember her, no justice, nothing. There is one final piece, Dr. Washington added gently. I found a record for a woman named Sarah, who was employed by the Whitmore family until her death in 1883, listed as a domestic servant. That must be Lily's mother, the Sarah she named in her letter. I reviewed pre-Civil War property ledgers. There is an entry for an enslaved woman named Sarah, owned by the Whitmore family in 1858. She would have been approximately 45 years old when she died in 1883. Elena processed this, the full, tragic picture becoming devastatingly clear. So Sarah was enslaved by the Whitmores before the Civil War. Following emancipation, she remained with them, most likely because she had no other options, no resources, and no real choice. When she passed away, they took her 10-year-old daughter and effectively re-enslaved her using the apprenticeship system. That aligns with all the evidence we have uncovered, Dr. Washington confirmed. And when Lily attempted to fight back, when she tried to create a record of her true circumstances, they punished her with such brutality that it killed her. Then they orchestrated a cover-up with a misleading death certificate and interred her without a service or a proper marker. Elena dedicated the next 2 weeks to painstakingly compiling all of their findings, constructing a thorough case file that presented Lily's story as completely as the fragmented historical evidence would permit. She collaborated with Marcus to produce a detailed report containing the original 1,888 portrait, accompanied by extensive digital analysis highlighting the collar and wrist scars, the calloused hands, and every other physical indicator of abuse and forced servitude. High-definition scans of all 7 letters, both the Whitmore family's correspondence and Lily's secret testimony. Census data, the death certificate, and property records tracing both the Whitmore lineage and the enslaved woman, Sarah, who was Lily's mother. Historical background on apprenticeship statutes and their application in the post-Reconstruction South to effectively perpetuate the enslavement of black children. The short news item from the Savannah Tribune, noting Lily's death and the allegations of violence. Professional commentary from medical historians regarding the scarring patterns visible in the image and what they revealed about the restraints used. A comparative study with other known instances of forced child labor and unlawful bondage in the 1882nd South. Once the report was finished, Elena organized a press conference at the Smithsonian. She extended invitations to historians, journalists, descendants of both enslaved persons and slaveholders, and delegates from civil rights groups. She also made a personal telephone call to Patricia Whitmore, asking if she would be willing to attend. "I will be there," Patricia stated without pause. "This is my family's legacy, and I will not turn away from it." The press conference occurred on a crisp November morning. The main hall was filled with reporters, scholars, and members of the public who had learned of the discovery. Elena stood at the lectern with the enlarged 1,888 portrait projected on a screen behind her. "Today, we are presenting the documented account of a child named Lily, who lived and died in Savannah, Georgia, in 1888, Elena began. "What you see behind me is a picture that was created as propaganda, an image intended to showcase the alleged kindness of a white family toward a black child in their custody. But through contemporary forensic examination and the recovery of hidden letters, we can now expose the truth this photograph was engineered to hide." She guided the audience through each component of the discovery: the initial assessment of the image, the revelation of the scarring, the unearthing of Lily's letters, and the records of her death. As she spoke, the screen displayed high-resolution images of every piece of evidence. Lily was not an apprentice learning a skill, Elena continued, her voice clear and unwavering. She was a child held in a state of coerced labor, physically bound with metal collars and ropes, beaten when she showed defiance, and ultimately killed when she tried to record the reality of her existence. This portrait, which her captors intended as proof of their compassion, has instead become an enduring testament to her suffering and her courage. She paused, allowing the gravity of her words to fill the room. But this is also a narrative about voice and self-determination. Lily knew the picture was a falsehood, so she wrote her own version of events and concealed it, hoping that one day someone would discover it and speak the truth. Today, 136 years later, we are finally fulfilling her request. We are telling her story. We are bearing witness to her life and her death. We are speaking her name and acknowledging the wrongs committed against her. Elena looked out at the full auditorium. Lily died at 14 years old. We do not know her full name. The Whitmores never recorded it, and she never had the chance to leave behind more than the few letters we found. But we know she lived. We know she resisted. We know she yearned for freedom, and we know that this photograph we see behind us, which seems to depict friendship, in fact documents a crime, child abuse, unlawful imprisonment, and ultimately, murder. Patricia Whitmore rose from her seat in the audience. Elena had offered her the opportunity to speak, and she had accepted. Patricia walked steadily to the podium, her back straight despite her years. She looked at the assembled crowd, then turned to regard the enlarged picture behind her, her ancestor, Margaret, standing beside Lily, the lie frozen in sepia. "My name is Patricia Whitmore," she started, her voice clear through the microphone. "Margaret Whitmore, the white girl in this picture, was my great-great-grandmother. That means the individuals who held Lily in bondage, who scarred her neck with metal collars, who beat her and ultimately caused her death, were my direct ancestors." The room was utterly silent. "I could stand here and claim that I am horrified, that I had no notion my family was capable of such brutality," Patricia continued. "But that would be untrue. I was raised in the South. I was raised hearing tales of the gracious antebellum period, of the devoted servants who were like family. I was raised with softened language and deliberate omissions, with stories that erased the violence, the theft, and the terror that built my family's wealth and comfort." She paused, collecting her thoughts. "When I discovered this picture in my grandmother's attic, something about it troubled me instantly. I could not explain what. I did not possess the expertise that Dr. Rodriguez and Dr. Chen applied to its analysis, but I felt its inherent wrongness. And instead of dismissing that feeling, instead of returning the picture to the trunk and pretending I had never seen it, I chose to pursue the truth." Patricia turned once more to look at the photograph. "The truth is horrific. My ancestor, Margaret, lived a long, privileged, and comfortable life. She died at 84, surrounded by family. Meanwhile, Lily died at 14, alone after years of abuse, her death concealed, and her body placed in an unmarked grave. That is the reality of what my family was involved in." She turned back to the audience. "But I believe we have a responsibility to confront these truths, however painful they may be. Because when we refuse to acknowledge our ancestors' actions, when we hide behind gentle euphemisms and lost cause mythology and tales of kindness and loyalty, we permit those injustices to continue resonating through the generations. We allow the falsehoods to endure." Patricia's voice grew firmer. "Lily deserves more than that. She deserves to be remembered honestly. She deserves to have her voice heard. She wrote those letters knowing she might die for it, hoping that one day someone would read them and know what happened to her. I am standing here today to say, we hear you, Lily. Your testimony has reached us. What was done to you was evil, and it was done by people whose blood runs in my veins." She paused, visibly moved. "I am thankful to Dr. Rodriguez for bringing this story to light. I am thankful that Lily's voice has finally been heard, and I dedicate myself to making certain that her story, the true story, not the lie my family attempted to tell through this picture, is taught and remembered. It is the only form of justice I can give to her now, across these 136 years. But I offer it wholly and without any condition." Patricia stepped back from the podium to a moment of profound silence, which then broke into sustained, respectful applause. Elena embraced her briefly before returning to the microphone. "What happened to Lily was not a unique event," Elena stated. "Throughout the South, in the years after the Civil War, thousands of black children were compelled into apprenticeships and other systems of bondage that were slavery in everything but name. Most of their stories were never written down. Most of their names were never officially recorded. Most of them left no testimony behind." She gestured toward the photograph. "But Lily did. Against impossible odds, fully aware of the danger, she wrote down the truth and concealed it. And because of her bravery, and because of Patricia Whitmore's bravery in seeking the truth about her own family's history, we now have this fully documented case that we can use to educate people about what truly occurred during this era." Elena looked directly at the cameras broadcasting the conference. "This photograph will now become a permanent part of the museum's collection, displayed alongside Lily's letters and the complete documentation of her story. We are also founding a new research initiative to identify and document other cases of children held in forced labor after the Emancipation Proclamation. Lily's story is one case. There were thousands of others. We owe it to all of them to tell the truth." 3 months after the press conference, the Smithsonian unveiled a new, permanent installation titled Unspoken Truths: The Story a Portrait Hides. The focal point was the 1,888 image of Margaret and Lily, displayed next to the high-resolution analysis that revealed the scars, the collar marks, and the proof of forced labor that had remained unseen for 136 years. But the display went far beyond the single picture. On the surrounding walls were Lily's letters, enlarged so every visitor could read her own words. There were historical papers explaining the apprenticeship system and other forms of post-Civil War servitude. There were comparative images and accounts of other children like Lily, whose ordeals had been only partially preserved. A video installation featured Patricia Whitmore speaking about her journey from discovering the photograph to confronting her family's past and what it meant to choose difficult truths over comfortable falsehoods. Elena stood in the exhibition hall on its opening day, observing visitors as they moved slowly through the space, reading Lily's words, studying the portrait, absorbing the gravity of the narrative. Many people were in tears. Some stood before Lily's letters for many minutes, reading her testimony again and again. A young black woman, perhaps 20 years old, approached Elena. "Thank you for doing this," she said softly. "Thank you for making sure Lily's voice was heard. My ancestors, I don't know their names. I don't have any letters from them, but I know their lives were probably a lot like Lily's. To see her story told, to see her words preserved, it feels like you are honoring all of them." Elena felt her throat tighten with emotion. That is precisely what we hoped this exhibit would accomplish. Lily's story is specific to her, but it also speaks for thousands of experiences that were never recorded. The young woman nodded, wiping her eyes. "The part that stays with me is that she knew. She knew they were creating a lie about her, and she made certain to leave the truth behind. She fought back with the only tool she had, her words. That is powerful." Similar conversations unfolded throughout the hall all day. Educators brought their classes. Families came and engaged in challenging discussions about history and honesty. Descendants of both enslaved people and slaveholding families came to bear witness. Late in the afternoon, Patricia Whitmore arrived. She walked slowly through the display, reading every panel, studying the enlarged portrait, standing for a very long time before Lily's final letter. "I come here once a week," she told Elena. "To remember, to bear witness, to ensure Lily is not forgotten." She paused. "I've been contacted by other descendants of families who enslaved people. They've seen the exhibit and want assistance looking into their own family histories. They are ready to face the truth, whatever it may be." Elena nodded. "We are creating a program to help with exactly that kind of research. Lily's case has opened a door. People are now willing to look at these old pictures, these family papers, and ask what truly lies beneath the surface." She turned to look once more at the picture of the two girls. Margaret, who had lived a long, privileged life and died surrounded by family, and Lily, who had died at 14, alone after years of suffering. But Lily had left her testimony, and now, 136 years later, people were finally listening. The portrait intended as propaganda had become evidence. The lies it was meant to tell had been dismantled, and Lily's voice, silenced by violence in 1888, was finally being heard. She wanted someone to remember that she existed, Patricia said softly, echoing the plea from Lily's final letter. She wanted someone to know that she fought for her freedom, even if she never held it in her hands. And now thousands of people know. Her story will be taught in schools. Her words will be preserved forever. She won. Elena looked at the photograph one last time at Lily's carefully composed expression, her downcast eyes, her scarred hands folded in front of her, and the hidden marks around her neck that modern technology had finally brought into the light. Yes, Elena said quietly, she won. The truth survived, and we are making certain it is never buried again. The exhibit remained open, sharing Lily's story with new visitors each day. Her letters were digitized and shared with scholars and educators across the globe. The photograph that was meant to conceal the truth had, instead, preserved it, waiting for the moment when technology and human courage would combine to bring Lily's voice out of the silence and into its rightful place in history. Margaret Whitmore's name appears in census rolls, birth registries, society columns, and obituaries, the full record of a life lived with advantage and ease. Lily had no last name in any official document, no record of her birth, no honest death certificate, no grave with a headstone, but she had her words, and now, finally, she had her witnesses.